Welcome to Comics League Dark. I am Jared. We are talking about Gotham by Gaslight with Sam Liu. Welcome back to the show, man.
What's up, you guys?
All right. And we're here with the old man Nick. What's up, dude?
For once, I am outshined. We have Sam Liu here in the house.
All right. So, Sam, tell us a little bit about the inception of this movie. Why don't you?
Again, I think this was the first one that I got like a producer credit on, even though it was sort of retrofitted. So I wasn't in on the first draft of the script. I think Jim Krieg, with some of his people, and Bruce obviously sort of did a lot of the lifting on it. It's kind of a weird. It's a really short story, right?
Yeah, it is.
And in a way, it's. I kind of feel like I don't want to pretend I'm like I've read everything like Noel has done, but I kind of feel like again it's a thing where there's like a lot of information and exposition kind of a thing. It's not like a linear type of story.
It's kind of the classic whodunit. That's how I see it.
Yeah, and in a way, just because I think it was so short, and I think it was the first Elseworld story, right? That
I think, from what I know, I believe so.
Yeah, at least I think that's what they were saying.
Yeah,
but it was a little bit, kind of.
Yes, it was. It was the first Elseworlds.
I mean, it's always hard, right? Because whenever when you do it for the first time, right, it's kind of like there's the sort of zeitgeist of it, right? Of it being like new, and that sort of carries, a certain percentage of sort of excitement. And so I feel like, things always get perfected as they sort of, go along, right? And so I don't know, in a way, it's kind of like, because it was so short, maybe, again, I don't really know, but I'm just kind of guessing that maybe they didn't want to take a huge chance on it. And so they kind of like, didn't want to like make the commit to like this super long kind of story. It kind of was obvious to us anyways, like who done it, right? It's like new character that's introduced. You know what I mean? Who's the odd one that's not, whatever. And so, again, just in retrospect, sort of talking to them a little bit, they kind of like had to do something that was going to surprise people, that was going to sort of be what was sort of expected in a way, because again, the whole whodunit kind of thing, it's like, if you can kind of pick it out, especially with, I feel like the modern audience where everybody's kind of guessing the end of stories nowadays anyways.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the whole point of a mystery, is you try and figure out the twist before the people in the movie do.
No lie, my mom and I were watching Hawaii Five-0, and she could legit, with 100% accuracy, predict all of the criminals.
It wasn't as complex. Right?
No. I'll say this though, my first time watching this film, I was legit shocked who turned out to be the Ripper. Sam Liu, you did a great job. You actually did it. Like, was that twist in the comics, or so I haven't read the comics, so I'm kind of hesitant.
He didn't do his homework, and I know I've been yelling at him before you came on.
I saw the
JJheat's here. What's up, dude?
I saw the movie. Isn't that perfection enough?
Flame on. How's everybody doing tonight?
Hey, what's up, JJheat?
And good talking to you again, Mr. Liu. How you doing?
Yeah, it's great seeing you again, or seeing your icon again.
Yeah, so Sam, it's like, so what was the impetus behind like making, spoiler alert, Jim Gordon Jack the Ripper?
I think it's just, again, I wasn't really in on the initial meetings and stuff like that, but it seemed like Jim Krieg, not Jim Gordon. I don't know for sure, but it seemed like to me that he sort of took the initiative and sort of like came up with something with, his group of like writers, right? And they sort of just submitted something, right? And I think, as I believe Bruce had said, it was just like, this is one of those scripts where he didn't have a lot of notes on. You know, it was kind of like
high praise.
Really sort of like well put together, And to answer your question, Nick, it's like it's very, very different. You know, and I think that's why like some of the people didn't like the movie is because it's so different than the actual. You know,
well, if they wanted to experience the original story, read the comic.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we always kind of say, but you know, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I get what you're saying.
Jared, we've talked about this like quite a few times, right? So I've been on the show like I don't know, almost a handful of times.
You're becoming a bit of a regular, sir.
I know.
Well, we love having you on, dude. So you're always welcome.
Yes, he always has a bit of prestige.
But it's kind of like, you know, I feel like it's really split in half, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, when we were doing like Batman Year One, we tried to be as faithful as possible to the comic.
And you so were, by the way.
And certain people hated it, you know. And then we do something and you do it different, and then other people hate it. So it's kind of like you can't please everyone.
If you do, exactly. If you don't.
Well, it's like a lot of the stuff that, and I've said this to you before, my whole problem with it's not like the comic is that, hey, listen, first off, a lot of stuff is not going to translate well to like an animated project or even a live action project. So of course, some stuff has to be like played around with. Plus, the audience for like this stuff, particularly when you go to a movie, is different than like the audience for like a comic book where like everyone knows who the criminal is. Nick, go ahead.
I have a question for Sam.
Yeah.
So obviously this movie that you did, it's a bit more violent and sexual than kind of the more usual fare. So my question is, did you guys receive any notes regarding the content? Like you said, oh, you need to dial this back, like maybe a little bit less blood. Like, was there any censorship of it? I say.
You know, I mean, I don't know. It's weird, right? Because again, it's about Jack the Ripper, right?
Yeah.
And so it just that basic sort of premise has, you know, the sexuality elements of it too, right? On multiple levels, and sort of again the violence, especially towards women, right?
Yeah.
And in a way,
he's not passing out candy canes.
Yeah, and in a way, you kind of have to. I feel like you have to kind of honor it a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of feel like, and I think Bruce, for the most part in general, right, is very tame. I mean, if you look at like James Tucker's kind of stuff, I mean, he'll have intestines and teeth falling, you know what I mean, getting like knocked out of your mouth.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And so I know this is like, you know, another sort of controversial one, but again, like I remember just like Killing Joke. I remember like James, after we had done that, he was just saying like, you guys did it actually kind of classy. He's like, if I would have done it, it would have been.
Well, I mean,
the last movie in his universe, Doomsday takes Black Manta and rips him in half, and you see the intestines.
That's what I mean. That's that he'll go there, right? Whereas Bruce is a little more sort of like, you know, he's a little more old school.
They tore Wonder Woman's arm off.
Yeah, and like Starfire's like intestines was like hanging out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was the one moment, by the way, watching that movie where I was like, oh wow, this is different.
Yeah.
But I do want to say this, because contrary to popular belief, I actually enjoyed the mystery aspect of this one much more than Batman Hush, the movie adaptation. I'm just gonna say that right now. That's just my personal opinion.
That's fired.
But would you would say you actually enjoyed the adaptation of Gotham by Gaslight more than working on Batman Hush for the DCAM movie? That would be my question.
Oh, actually, I didn't direct Hush.
Okay.
It was
someone didn't do their homework.
Fair enough. You got me.
No, that's fine. I mean,
I'm razzing him. It's okay.
Where I think Justin Copeland was the director on that. I think that was his first directing kind of thing. You know, I'd kind of worked with him for a while, you know, and just kind of grooming him, I suppose, you know, and we were gonna co-direct on that one, whatever, but it just became a thing where, you know, I was during that time again, it was really rough, right? Because again, like I'm working with Bruce on his, and then I'm working with James on his, you know, and so it became a thing where it just Justin took over on that. I storyboarded a little bit on that, but I didn't actually, you know. I thought that one was going to be difficult, you know, because again, it's just kind of like, you know, there's all these sort of A-list villains you have to within their moment, right? I was just like, this thing's gonna, you know what I mean? I'm thinking about how fans act and all that kind of stuff. So I was just like, oh my gosh, this thing's gonna be be tough, you know.
Plus, with Hush, you're talking about one of the most iconic Batman stories of one of the most iconic characters. So the pressure keeps mounting to do this. But what do you want to ask, Nick?
So getting back, you mentioned how Bruce. I'm assuming you're talking about Bruce Timm.
Yeah.
You said he didn't have very many notes for the story. Did he have any, and what were some that kind of stick out in your head? I know it's maybe been a minute, but like any that you remember.
You know, nothing. Again, super in particular. They're just sort of like, you know, little clarity notes and things like that, or sort of like, you know, different like moments a little bit, you know, consolidating them a little bit. Things again, this things that are not like really fans. You know, it's like interesting to fans.
Okay.
It's all the nuts and bolts of it and stuff. You know.
All right, so I actually have a question now, seeing it as it is my show. But what were some of the difficulties you had in the production of this movie?
Let's see, difficulties in it. You know, actually, again, this one was pretty. You know, there are like enjoyable ones. There are like difficult ones, right? And a lot of times it has to deal with sort of like the making of it, right? And again, the script was really solid. You know, I think, you know, just as somebody reading the script, I enjoyed it as well. I mean, I was kind of pretty much engaged the whole time. You know, I mean, I'm a little bit of a, I don't know, I don't know what you would call it, but again, it's I kind of feel like, you know, I look at things a little bit more like high art-ish sometimes. You know what I mean? In stories, I always look for like things like themes, you know, development, sort of, you know, what are we saying? And so stories that don't have that, they're a little bit rough for me to work on. You know what I mean? And so I enjoyed this one because I kind of felt like there was a, you know, there was a thread that you needed to sort of, you know, a needle that you need to. What's that kind of like the needle that you need to thread? I'm butchering.
I think
Thread
the needle. Yeah.
Yeah. And so a lot of it was again just sort of, I don't know, keeping track of kind of like development and sort of. You know what I mean, how do we hide the mystery? How do we, you know, how much do we sort of show? You know, there's a whole sort of, you know, again, like I'm gonna get yelled at by the wokeness of it and stuff like that, but there's a suffragette element of it, right? And which I really enjoyed. You know what I mean? Like I really enjoyed Catwoman and kind of what she represented. You know, she was like a strong, but still kind of like sexy woman. You know what I mean? And there's
that's kind of Catwoman's character anyway in the comics, is that she's very against like whatever the status quo is. So really, that's not necessarily woke in my mind. It's more like it's just consistent with her character. All the time.
Yeah.
In my opinion, Catwoman was acting very in character. Like, I think this is exactly how Catwoman would act in this situation. Yeah. I think you're spot on with her portrayal.
Yeah, and again, she wasn't in the original material. You know what I mean? She wasn't in this story. You know, it was an element that Jim and his, you know, group of talented writers, you know, they sort of, you know, they brought other elements into this kind of thing, you know, of the time, you know.
Yeah, so. and there's a lot of iterations of Catwoman where in modern times she looks out for the girls on the street. So it's you're basically just taking this character and putting her a different time, but she's acting exactly the same. Now, was Leslie Tompkins in the original comic? Like, which ones are original? Which character is original? I think that's the best way to go about it.
You know, I feel so bad because again, it was so long ago.
I feel bad myself. So
JJheat, save us.
Yes.
I know for a fact Catwoman wasn't in the original Gotham by Gaslight Elseworld. So I want to say it was basically the three. It was Batman, Jim Gordon. I want to say Leslie Tompkins, but please correct me on that. Most of the villains you see on screen for the most part. And there were only like 3 original or omissions I saw, at least 3 I recognized. But if there were more than that, please let me know in the comments.
I will say, though, it was hilarious watching the movie and all of a sudden seeing the street urchins come in and they're like, "Oh, Jason." And I'm like, Oh wow, that is cool. I
Yeah.
knew immediately what it is, and I'm like, actually, you know what? That is really clever.
Oh, also, did you notice? So it's Jason,
What's up,
Tim,
RJ?
and Richard. I don't know if you realize that.
It's pretty much that.
But did you notice that, like, the big guy, he's like, oh, these are my little robins.
Yeah. There you go. I'm like, yep.
But Sam, one question for you is, what's one moment, one shot, or one animation that you would say you're most proud of in this movie?
Ooh, that's rough, because I feel like I've because I'm old, right? I feel like I've been doing this for a while. So like when I was
Jared,
younger,
don't you sorry?
like fight scenes used to like be why I got into animation, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for many years now, you know, I like, even if it's like an awesome looking fight scene or whatever like that, I just kind of go like, okay, it serves its purpose. You know, I'm more sort of touched by like emotional moments or character moments that I kind of feel like really ring true, right? And I love it when things kind of like you set something up, you build it, and when it comes together, it resonates. You know,
I love it when a story comes together.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. The A-Team. There you go.
Yeah, because there's so many times, right? I kind of feel like there's stories, and sometimes, you know, like, you know, you see even in live action as well, right? Like that moment's not resonating somehow. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, and I feel like that's on the pacing. That's on sort of the directing. You're not slowing the moment down. You're not sort of highlighting certain things. You're not giving it the moment to sort of like absorb, right? Because, you know, a lot of times, again, because especially in like TV animation, right, which is for the most part what this is, right? It's kind of like you build a part and then the other stuff gets added later, right? It's not like, especially things like music, right? It's not like, oh, we have a cut, we have the composer kind of, you know, do something on it. We listen to it and we're just like, oh my gosh, that music is so good here. Let's slow this whole part down so there could be way more music or something like that, right?
Yeah.
You have to you just sort of do it. You give it to the composer. He sort of, you know, the pictures for the most part, kind of the time is kind of locked. And so you have to kind of like guess sometimes, right? You're like, I think there's going to be music here, so let's slow it down and give it time for the composer to kind of put the music in. Right? And sometimes it doesn't work because then you give it time and the composer doesn't have anything. Now you have this really slow dead space, you know. But for the most part, I think the pacing is always pretty quick, you know.
Yeah.
But
yeah, flow is a very important thing when it comes to storytelling. I'm a writer myself. I make comic books, and I'm always very concerned with like flow. And I don't want to share too much about myself. It's all about you, so let's get to that.
It's about the comic, you know. One of the things I was going to say is because like I always feel bad like whenever I come to one of these, because it's kind of like, oh, you're just talking to me about it. It's just like I'm kind of curious what you guys think about it, and then I can answer. You know what I mean? Like you.
Jared, may I?
Let me start. I will say one of my favorite like attentions to detail is in the final like actual fist fight between Gordon and Batman, where you actually have them in the classic like punching pose, and I'm like, okay, that instead of having them like this, you actually have them in the fighting style of back then. And I'm like, that's a nice attention to detail. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Let's.
All right.
Also, wait. So, Tevi actually has an interesting question. Do you think this movie is better than Red Sun? Oh boy.
Oh,
that sounds loaded.
You're asking Sam to pick a child. Jeez.
You know, because
all the child children are perfect.
I like both of them. Do you know what I mean?
You should be a politician, Sam.
No. I mean, and I mean that honestly. You know what I mean? Because, I feel like, especially like, you know, when, you know, we're doing like press for it and things like that, right? I just remember being in the, you know, at the Paley Center with Bruce Greenwood and for Carpenter, right? And they had such, I don't know, good things to kind of say about the characters and sort of some of the experience and stuff like that, right? And then in Red Sun, it was kind of the same thing with Amy Acker, with Jason Isaacs, you know, and I think the other actors too, but they were just talking about how like in depth. Oh yeah, like Dietrich Bader, right? It was just how in depth like the characters were and things like that, and how they were very proud to sort of be a part of it. You know what I mean? And so again, like that, it's it's really weird because it's like I understand like like fans that they have certain attachments to things, right? Whatever the source, especially it's hard when you're working on something that's been established, right? Because again, you don't know what people are attached to, right? And so for us, again, we're trying to tell a contained story because a lot of times when we're adapting these kind of things, there's history involved, right? It's kind of like, I don't know, I always use the Thor thing, right? The Better Ray Bill thing, right? Is because it's that story is about a moment where Thor is basically is sort of at his almost like weakest in a way, right? It's beat by Better Ray Bill, right? On many levels, multiple times, and as it contains story, it's not a good Thor story, right? Because you have to have the context of who Thor is and that he's a strong, what Mjolnir is, you know what I mean? But when he loses it, you get the sort of gravity of the situation, right? But if you start a thing where basically he's got a hammer and then some alien beats him up and takes his hammer and he's crying, and is crushed by it, people are gonna be like, what's the big deal? You know what I mean? It's like, the hammer, right?
And why are they telling Thor that he can't touch it?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I don't know, like, again, just this sort of contained story within, I feel like what we, had to work with and kind of what we sort of did with it. I'm pretty proud of both the stories, the whole Red Sun thing, a lot of people were really pissed about the ending, right? But because when you asked earlier just about what was like the most difficult thing about the production, like Red Sun, there was way more, right? Because Red Sun, like there's so many locations, and especially that end. Again, I think I mentioned this, in the last one we were talking about Red Sun, right? It's just because every background that you do, every environment that you do, somebody has to draw it and somebody has to paint it.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of times what we can do, and that's why we have so much reuse, is because you're kind of like, oh, it's just some shot of the highway. Do we have to really design a highway and paint it? Can we just use a highway from someplace else? Because who cares really, right?
Yeah, it's a highway.
It's a highway. As long as it fits the art style, who cares?
Yeah. Oh, there's a liquor store. You know what I mean? Oh, there's a whatever. That then I know some fans, their whole thing is like, oh, here's a checklist of things that have been reused and stuff. But as a storyteller with very, very limited resources, you just want a piece to kind of keep moving, right? You don't want to spend your assets on designing a highway.
Plus, the other thing is like going back to the Red Sun ending. If you try to do the looping backwards, that is really convoluted. Even in the comic, I'm like, what?
Yeah, and it's a thing when you're jumping forward in time through generations, right? So you have to do like, some picture of the Earth 100 years from now, 250 years in the future, then 1,000 years, and then whatever the far future, and then so these are all sort of like, and especially in Red Sun, just because again it happened in America during different decades, 3 different decades, right? In America and in Russia, right, with their military, so there was a ton of assets on it. Like that one, I remember we had a talk with basically the senior vice president of like production that was just like, you guys are 200 backgrounds over what we can do. You guys have to start cutting scenes.
Wow.
Yeah. So that basically said like, we're not doing this thing into the future, because again, that's like one background that, what does the future look like, and how do we sort of sell that as the future in one image that needs to get painted, you know what I mean? And that it's heavy resources, right? And again, it's just a montage of the different decades. So that's like at least 5 paintings, do you know what I mean? Allocated that you just can't use. Whereas like it's better used basically in, Red Square. You know what I mean?
I feel like animation at your level is more of an exercise of resource management.
Totally.
I mean, obviously there's the artistic creation, but it's more like, all right, well, we got this much time to do this. We can only do this. It's more of like a Tetris game than anything else, it seems.
Well, Sam, even you said on the show many times, they don't give you that large of a budget, so you got to work with what you got.
Yeah.
If I may ask, and feel free to like not say like decline to answer, what was the budget for Gotham by Gaslight? If I may ask, if you feel free to say.
I think it's public information.
Yeah, for the most part, like all of them are roughly around $3 million-ish.
Mm-hmm.
But animation is expensive. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a lot of, you have to pay the animators, you have to pay like all the people, sort of like the designers, the colorists, the storyboard artists, the writers. It's not like, oh, you just have like a camera and then you get like, you can do like a very limited story with like, I don't know, like you just hire like 10 actors or whatever like that, right? And then you just find a location, then you shoot them or whatever, right?
And how long do each of these movies roughly take to make?
Less than a year.
Wow, that's a pretty tight turnaround for these
that's
kind of
fast.
things.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's an overlap, right? Because again, because what we do is like from the script level, which is the pre-production, right? Or I guess in general, it's pre, right? All the storyboards, all the designs, all the whatever kind of things, the timing, that's sent to the animation studio, right? And then we don't do anything, so we're just waiting for the animation to come back, and that's like 4 months, I think, right? And then when it comes back, we're on the clock again, and then we have to go through post, right? We have to do the editing,
And
closing.
Sorry, finish your sentence. I'm being bad.
So basically, again, I'm adding it up, as far as like there's the pre and the post. There's a middle part that is time, but again, we're not touching it. Do you know what I mean? And again, that's why usually during that time we're working on another one. So when people ask like how long does it take to make one of them, it's kind of like it's a little bit more complicated than just like, oh, we just work on it from front to back. You know what I mean? It's like we work on it, and then we wait, and then we finish it, and then it's out.
All right, that makes sense. What do you want to ask, Nick?
I think my question was kind of obvious. I was going to ask like, oh, do you farm it out to like places like Korea? But I feel like that's kind of thing. Yeah. But I just want to more say like a comment. So I did really like the film. I actually really liked it kind of from like production design standpoint. I liked how you turned Gotham into like a bit of a Victorian London kind of stuff. Like I really liked the attention to detail with like how the streets were laid out, and also like the clothing, because like especially like the women's clothing were very much like 1880s European fashion. Like the women in America weren't necessarily wearing that type of clothing, and the menswear was also very in tune with that period. Yeah. So I assume.
Well, Nick, you would know what people dressed as back then.
I was waiting
You're
for
from that era.
I was waiting for this joke. You were good, sir. You held on as long as you could, but I'm 36, so he likes making old man jokes.
He's the oldest of us, so there you go. Actually, you know what's interesting, Sam? I actually have a question. I kind of springboards off of what Tevia asked. So why don't we have a Wonder Woman Elseworlds? Why, in your opinion, do you think we don't get that many Wonder Woman animated movies?
Ooh, good question.
It's difficult because I feel like the industry is really feeling it now, right? It's business run, basically, right? It's business first. It's not like this creative. Most of it, right? I would say like 95, if not more percent of it, right, is business decisions, right?
It should be
that you make that they're trying to make money from,
Naturally.
And so there's very few times, unless you're like doing an indie film, do you know what I mean, that you're actually doing quote unquote art, right? Not to say that there's not art being done within this space.
Yeah.
Most of the movies or whatever, right, are there to be summer blockbusters or whatever, whatever the sort of popular kind of thing that people want.
I'd even go as far to say like the films that you made for Warner Brothers. Obviously, they're a corporate product, but I still see them as art.
Yeah, we try. Do you know what I mean? I mean, for real, we try, because again, like, I don't know, like, I know, like, there are people that are sort of a little bit less, but like with Bruce and all of them, Bruce Timm, James,
we love Bruce Timm around here. He's the greatest.
Yeah, but they're trying to do high quality.
You really had to say that, huh, Nick? I'm still recovering from Killing Joke, so.
Wait, that film came out like what, 7 years ago?
I'm making a joke, JJheat.
It's still too soon for him.
It's still traumatic. The wound is still bleeding.
Well, put a tourniquet on or something. Like, geez,
I can't put a tourniquet on my heart, Nick. I can't put a tourniquet on my heart. That's not anatomically possible.
Jared, you're cutting me with how edgy you're being.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Sam. We have a thing.
It's all good. It's all good. But go on with what you were saying, Sam.
I forgot what I was saying.
All right. Well, JJheat hasn't spoken. He's been very patient.
Yeah,
Is there anything you'd like to say, JJheat?
As for me, just it's a great to have you on the channel and to have a chance to talk to you, Sam. But in my opinion, the one thing I really want to comment on the Wonder Woman, we really should have gotten the Wonder Woman animated series by now. So let me say that first and foremost.
Oh yeah. I forgot what we were talking about. But yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. He's cool. Okay, good. Finish your thing, JJheat.
Yeah.
But even with that, Wonder Woman, okay, outside of a select few, at least by the general audience, Wonder Woman is not known for having a rogues gallery, if that makes sense. So it would kind of be hard to follow, let's say, for example, the Bruce Timm formula with a Wonder Woman animated series. Wonder Woman would work better as an ensemble with that structure, at least in my opinion.
Wonder Woman essentially has 2, maybe 3 villains: Cheetah, Cersei, and maybe Dr. Psycho.
And a good 4th would be Maxwell Lord, but he's more of a Justice League International villain, but that's either here or there.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that I think about with Wonder Woman is that to your point about there being a business decision, it's like when you look at like Wonder Woman projects, obviously the 2017 movie was big. Then you had a couple of animated movies that, as far as I know, did okay. Then you have the 1984 movie that kind of. So it's like really from a business perspective, it probably looks like more of a risk than like doing another Batman or Superman movie.
Yeah, for a lot of people, when they think of Wonder Woman, they think of the Linda Carter version. We have to accept that is the most high profile version of the character, and that was in the 70s.
Yeah. So the thing, so I remember it was along these lines that the question was, well, why hasn't there been a series, right? It's exactly what you said. Like, she doesn't have like really, and James Tucker, right, had talked, and I had talked about this, right? When we did I forgot what it's called now, Wonder Woman Bloodlines.
Yeah.
Well, I remember, it was around after, the Wonder Woman movie had come out, right? And so it was, I don't know, for us, supposedly sort of a big deal, right? So I remember just thinking like, okay, wow, we got to like put our A game on this, right? And I remember getting the script and I was just like, what is this script? And I'm like,
that's a good sign.
Because I'm trying to like, again, I'm thinking of like,
what is this
story, right? What is this story what is the contained story about this, right? So I remember talking to James about it and just going like, but this is just like an episode of something that kind of happens. Do you know what I mean? It's not like a life.
It's very small contained. It's not like this big, like, oh my gosh, she's fighting Darkseid or something like that.
Yeah. And so his whole thing was like, because the whole Decamo thing, right? Is like he's saying the things that you're saying, right? It's just like nobody knows Wonder Woman's rogues gallery, right? It's like she's not like with Batman, right? He's got Alfred, he's got his family, right? Who's Wonder Woman's family except for the Amazons, right? And
there's Donna, there's Cat. They try and expand it, but the problem is they don't do a good job of letting you know these are her family.
And it's not consistent. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everybody knows Alfred, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows, your favorite Lois, right?
Everyone knows. Everyone knows.
Why did you have to say Lois's name? Why?
I mean, everyone knows Jimmy Olsen. Everyone knows Perry White. Yeah.
And Wonder Woman doesn't really have that, right? And so Bloodlines was an attempt, because after James explained to me, I was just like, okay, this is why we're doing it, right? Is that he's trying to set up basically the people that are in Wonder Woman's, sort of like vicinity, of
influence.
Yeah. And so, Cat Grant, and she was trying to, not Cat Grant, sorry. Shoot, I'm getting my things mixed up now.
Kale? Veronica Kale?
like Veronica Cale, you know, again, even the Minotaur guy, which I was just like, I don't know, you know,
Ferdinand.
that was,
Aries. I mean,
read the
Aries is always a big part of Wonder Woman.
To be clear, I read the Wonder Woman comics, so I know exactly what this is.
Yeah.
So Jared knows what he's talking about. So.
Yeah.
But I will say, my problem with Bloodlines, respectfully, is that to a certain degree, it comes up as a little vindictive when Wonder Woman is like, where Steve Trevor's like, oh, you were flying with Superman in the past. You didn't really have time for me. And he's like, well, I'm not flying with Superman now. It goes back to my problem with like Death of Superman with the off-screen breakup and stuff. So I'm like,
you got a throwaway line, Jared. That's better than
throwaway line does not count, JJheat.
But I explained to you why we had to do that, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
did you?
Did I?
Yeah, you did. Correct if I'm wrong. I think it was like because they want for Death of Superman, they wanted Lois there.
Right.
So that's like,
yeah.
You didn't really have time to break them up proper, so you kind of had to just do like one line.
Yeah, and again, it's like a lot of times, and this is James being subversive, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, oh, he has this whole thing that's like charted out as far as like, oh, these movies are going to build up to this one thing, you know, which Bush's is a little more like that, right? After they agreed upon it. James did that on his own, right? A lot of times, again, what we do, right, is kind of like, oh, we agree on, you know, with DC, with Warner Home Video, right? With the people that sort of put the money in to sort of make these things, right? They kind of agree on like, oh, what are we going to do next, right? And they always want, again, the big, you know, year one, Killing Joke, you know, Dark Knight,
more Batman,
whatever, like, you know, again, like Killing Joke was on the table for so long, right, since the beginning, right? But none of them wanted to work on it, right? Until it got sort of forced on it, right? But all of these kind of things, right, like Judas contract, blah, blah, all this kind of stuff, right? Because they're not looking at it as continuity. They're looking at it as just sort of like, what's the next project we're going to do? Because they're one-offs, right? But James was trying to actually make a continuity out of it. So we didn't know Death of Superman was going to come up, right? Because there are things that have been on my plate, then off my plate, right? Like the whole Batman Beyond things have been on my plate and off my plate for a long time, right? Red Sun keeps off my plate, you know.
So there was a Batman Beyond thing in the mix?
There was. Do you know what I mean? Again, it's all.
I need details. Sorry, I'm a huge Batman Beyond fan.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I got to derail this stream for a second. Please tell me everything about this Batman Beyond movie. I need to know about it.
I'm trying not to get my hopes up, Nick.
It didn't get that far. Do you know what I mean? It became a thing where it's just like, but again, it's business, right? It's kind of like, okay, you know, DC, what do you want to do? What do you want to see next? You know, you know, Warner Home Video, what do you want to see next? You know, and then us, what do we want to do? Work on, kind of a thing, right? And most of the time, it's kind of like if they bring up stuff, then we're kind of like, you have to like, do we want to work on it or not? Do we want to do that or not? You know what I mean? And then it becomes
chat.
Certain ones
I know
keep back up, right? So when Death of Superman kind of came up, right, it became a thing because again, like we were all like, why are we working on Death of Superman? But they already did that with Doomsday. You know?
Yeah,
that was literally the first thing you did. That was literally the first thing you did back in 2005.
Yeah, it's the first one, but even on the Lois thing, I'm going to bring up this one thing because Pika made this comment. Lois is actually not that big of a role in the original comic, though. So I'm like,
she plays a role in Rain.
Rain, yes, but the death
and
trade
World Without
from
Superman.
cover.
She's
and
also
a World Without Superman. But my point is, in the trade labeled Death of Superman. Plus, here's the thing about that. With the continuity that you were doing with those movies, it was like very much based on like the new 52 era comics. So then all of a sudden you're James is bringing in a post-crisis story and trying to fit that into there. So I'm like, why put in the continuity and not just do it as its own thing?
Yeah.
Because
again, like I was explaining, right?
Yeah.
It's like these things aren't planned out ahead of time, right?
Okay.
During the time the like war and all that came out was around when the new 52 happened. They were like, oh, we need to reflect what's going on in the comics, right?
Yeah.
Then that just went away, right? But James had already started a continuity, so now he's just like, well, I'm stuck now because again, the only way we're going to be able to produce this is to kind of have a house look, right? Because again, it's just like it's difficult, like having to do Red Sun. Red Sun was difficult because one of the other most difficult thing about it was finding a designer for it, right? Like Soul the Dragon, we had a really difficult time finding a designer for it, right? And so again, a lot of these things.
Why was it so difficult? Because you're basically just doing like 70s, funk kind of a like kung fu funk kind of thing.
Again, we're only allowed 2 character designers.
Oh.
So you have to find somebody that's able to hit this style and draw pretty much everything. Turns and everything. Consistency. There was a period where Phil Barrasso was going to work on Soul of the Dragon, right?
Good choice.
And but he got pulled off to do something else, and so we ended up basically doing Bruce Timm style. And a lot of times we do Bruce Timm styles because we can't find somebody. You know what I mean? So we find somebody that can emulate his style because there's a huge library of Bruce Timm like background characters, right, or incidentals that we can pick from.
And as far as like recruiting talent, I imagine it's a lot easier to recruit talent who can hit that Bruce Timm style, especially in like the Warner Brothers sphere, than it is for a lot of anything else.
Yeah. So again, like the people that want like Brian Boland's style, stuff like that, who's going to draw like Brian Boland?
Yeah,
Brian Boland.
Who's going to? How many of the animators? Because again, there's a ton of animators on it. It's not just like, oh, there's one guy that's animating the whole thing, right? And he's the best artist, right? You can tell. That's why there's drop-offs in animations, is because you have some really good people, and again, because of the money, right? It's like you can get the A-list people, the B-list people, and the C-list people, right? Because of the way the money is, from what I hear overseas, it's divided up into like we can afford 2 A-list people, maybe 5 B people, and then the rest of them have to go to C's because we just don't have the money for it.
Yeah, because I'm just gonna say that like some of these Dikembe movies have gorgeous animation. Like,
yeah,
I'm just gonna say some of the animation, like Batman Bad Blood, like the Teen Titans versus Justice League, like Teen Titans versus Justice League. Did you work on that one?
Yeah, I directed on that one. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to say, like the dance sequence, like the stuff at the park,
the Sailor Moon transformation sequence.
we talked about that last time.
By the way,
I didn't want to mention
my favorite Dikembe moment. I actually have 2 of them. It's in War when Darkseid goes, "How dare you? I am Darkseid," and Superman just plows right into him and goes, "I don't care." That's not in the comic, but that's an addition where I was like, okay, that's awesome. And the second part is when is at the very end in Apocalypse War when Lois Lane dies for reasons other than Lois Lane dying. It's when Superman just beats the crap out of Darkseid and he's like, "Do you know what you took from me, a-hole?" And he just gouges his eyes out.
It's basically the Hulk versus Loki scene in Avengers.
I got a good question.
It's basically the Superman scene from the Snyder Cut, JJheat. But
I got a good question. So, Sam, so you adapted a lot of really good DC stories. Is there any DC story that you wanted to adapt, but for some reason you're not able to? Like, what are some of the ones that got away? My comic book buying or fandom kind of thing is basically 80s and 90s, right? That's fine.
That works.
A lot of good stories.
So I was lucky that I basically worked on pretty much the big ones that I wanted to. Do you know what I mean? And the only one that I wanted to work on was basically, again, this is like one that I'm sure most sort of, the hard thing is finding out, is what does, part of it is kind of understanding who the audience is, right? Again, most of the people that watch it, I understand they were into it, like Jared, right? They just want to see big fight scenes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not as interested.
Well, Jared wants to see Superman make out with Wonder Woman, but that's his thing.
As do a lot of people. Stupid.
One of the things we figured out is like sex not a good thing in these animated things. People always seem to not.
Yeah, and even in this film, especially in like the beginning, I'm sorry, I just gotta say, you guys do not do sexy very well. Like the blood and the action stuff is great, but this is just this is a nitpick really, but
go ahead.
The opening scene with like Poison Ivy and whatnot. I saw what you're trying to do. It just, you guys, I could kind of feel like you guys are a bit uncomfortable with that kind of thing.
Because so much of it, obviously, I think there's a disconnect, right? Because again, it's a cartoon, right? Mm-hmm. And the other thing is we don't have like the smoothest sort of animation usually.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so things that are supposed to be seductive and all that kind of stuff, sometimes, generally, again, it for the most part, it kind of I don't know. It's a difficult thing to sort of transition into sometimes, right? But the poison ivy thing again, it's like, I mean, if you're saying it's because of the animation, I thought it was kind of okay. You know what I mean? I thought like the can dance was really fun.
Yeah, I will say the can dance was better. Like there was a lot of quick shots with that one.
You know, because I mean, are you talking about the animation of her dancing, of Ivy? Dancing?
Poison Ivy dancing in like the initial scene. And yes, I will agree with you. The can dance actually is a lot better. And I will say, like, one of the things I think you did excel at was with Selena, giving her like some of the seductive looks, because that's more her style. She's more subtle with it. And I think you guys were really good with like kind of like, you know, that kind of style.
Yeah, I mean, the poison ivy thing, right, was supposed to be that she's working there and she actually doesn't like working there, right?
Yeah, I did get that. I did get that. So you succeeded that part.
And then people kind of ogling, and then her, she's just sighing, right? So
yeah, I definitely picked up on that. So you were successful in that regard.
But you know, again, it's Jack the Ripper. He's supposed to be killing prostitutes. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you kind of have to like show that, right?
Yeah.
So there is actually something I kind of wanted to bring up, and so obviously this takes place with Jack the Ripper, a notorious serial killer. I'm trying to not.
It's YouTube. It's YouTube.
All right, fine. So one of the things I find interesting is you included the World's Fair, which was obviously kind of an homage to the Columbian Exposition, you know, the White City. I was just kind of wondering, were you intending to kind of include like some H.H. Holmes stuff in there, because H.H. Holmes is tied to like the World's Fair? So I just found it kind of interesting, you know, you're doing Jack the Ripper and they include the World's Fair, because obviously Gotham is in America. You have the American flags, and you're doing kind of like a homage to the Columbian, like as far as the World's Fair, were you modeling after the Columbian Exposition?
That's a little too in the weeds.
I'm sorry. I just went uber nerd.
I know, like I know you're.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's. I'm used to, again, because.
And Nick, I'm playing this for you.
Dweeb.
I have earned that. I earned that. I'm so sorry, Sam. I was that guy.
You know, those are always, because a lot of times, again, we're just trying to get like the feel of something or the emotion of something, right? And we only have a certain amount of time to, I mean, like Red Sun, right? Like, I remember somebody had said basically like the way the American flags hung was reversed, right? So things like that always is just like, I never would have known that. And you know what? It's like we didn't have enough time to basically actually research how the flags are supposed to hang. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, so, that's the level of detail that you're. I think for what you're doing, that's a level of detail that you're kind of not really expected to have. Like, it's cool if you do, but if you don't, I don't think anyone's gonna hang you out to dry.
Yeah, I mean, because even one of the things that we always hate, right, is like whenever you're like, oh, somebody's reading like a magazine. Now you got to do all this text, you know what I mean, around in on it, and then you're like, man, do we really have to like write articles or something like that? And so it's
squiggle.
Yeah.
Or you can just do what the movies do, where like there's this one paper that's in like 500 movies that like this newspaper was created in like the 80s, and like everyone uses it.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of, I mean, I remember seeing this thing about, I think Gladiator, right? And I think it really is about the same, you know, like when they were filming the beginning of it, where, you know, they were going to execute Russell Crowe's character, right? So they had him on his knees, whatever, and they were gonna, and so they had a thing where they swung, and they didn't have a shot of basically blood splattering somewhere, so they took it from a different movie. You know, it's because
I did not know that. Wow,
you're just looking for, like, I need a shot, I need the thing. Do you know what I mean? Or
close
like,
enough at this
point. Trying to sell this thing, and I need this shot. You know, and so again, sometimes we have to do things like we can pull it from another movie. That's why we do reuse sometimes. You know what I mean? Sometimes, I mean, we do things a lot where we're taking images from a different scene sometimes, and like in there, and either
movies do that a lot. So like, I don't know if you knew this, but for Spider-Man No Way Home, the actors for Sandman and the Lizard were not actually in the movie.
Oh.
All of their live action shots were pulled. Like Thomas Hayden Church is from Spider-Man 3, and then all the lizard stuff is from Amazing Spider-Man.
Oh,
they just kind of did some CGI magic, so they weren't actually there.
We'll leave it on that. With the Snyder cut, what they did, because they needed some shots, what they actually did is they took stuff from like Man of Steel and stuff, and sometimes reversed it, so like it looks different.
Right. I mean, it happens all the time again, because that's just what happens when you get into the narrative process, right? Or the edit, right? Because you commit to like a path of something, and then you're like,
no, Cameron, they were not. That was stock footage.
Yeah. It's like
very, very well edited stock footage, but stock footage nonetheless.
What's hilarious is I run into that a lot of the times when I'm making fan edits of stuff, because I'm like, okay, I need this scene.
right.
Close, and I made one for like a project I was working on. It's basically like Wonder Woman was supposed to kill Maxwell Lord, and I'm for a story I was doing. So I'm like, Maxwell Lord has not appeared in any DC animated project, so I got to do. Where's Wonder Woman killing someone? Can I please use that?
Right.
I'm like, close enough.
Yeah.
I think in the Arrowverse, there's like a scene where they take character Themyscira and they just use footage from the Wonder Woman movie, because instead of spending like a golly amount of money to create new Themyscira, just use stock footage. Instead
of actually just filming on a beach and having some people in Grecian robes, that wouldn't have been not lazy at all.
Yeah.
No. The modern thing is to stick them in front of the big LCD screen.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
I'm sorry, Sam. I'm sorry.
That volume thing.
Again, there's plenty of examples of it, right? Like James Tucker, I remember. Like one of the things that he has always said is like, we're basically making B movies, you know?
Yeah.
And so I don't know, you know, I think of like, you know, James Cameron and Terminator and stuff like that, right? And there's pretty famously like that whole, you know, at the end, like the eye and it's going out or whatever, they just had like a cigarette behind the thing or whatever. And then you know what I mean? It's like, you just smoke and mirror it, or you just sort of, you can.
You want to talk about low budget filmmaking? So the Evil Dead, I think it was like when they're filming one of the Evil Dead movies, they needed a Steadicam, but they were operating their peanut butter. Their budget was a peanut butter sandwich. Okay, so what they did is they took the camera, mounted it on a 2x4, got a crap ton of KY jelly, and just slid it across.
Yeah,
that was how they did a Steadicam shot.
I mean, again, however you get it done, you know?
Exactly.
And I mean, like, I feel like TV, you know, especially back in the day, you know, it's kind of like, I don't know. I remember just having conversations with like Graham Vietti, right? I don't know if you know who he is. He's like the guy he's the executive producer on Young Justice, right? We kind of grew up together, right? As far as like, you know, work relationship thing, right? And I remember like X-Files was something that we always watched back in like the 90s, right? And that was like one of the first, for us anyways, movies that like TV series that felt cinematic, right? Like they were doing things that we felt like they weren't really doing in normal TV. You know what I mean? They were the way they would shoot things. Sometimes they would shoot people's shadows on the walls, right? Which is a very cinematic thing, and not for TV, you know, 90s or 80s, you know.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of like when I first saw Smallville. Because Smallville is kind of like one of those shows that it did actually kind of elevate the art of TV. Because like if you look at what Smallville was doing back in 2001, like it had very high production quality. Like not only was it because it was on the WB, which
it holds up actually remarkably well.
Like it
really does.
It had major special effects. Like the cinematography was top notch. Like the lighting, for a show of its type, it was very well produced.
Yeah, and you know, that's again like, so we're talking about the 90s even, or just even before that, right? And so it's kind of like, you know, you have to kind of work with what you have, you know, and then like, X-Files was one of the ones, you know, for us that we talk about.
Yeah,
really we're trying to like on a low budget maximize their things, right? They build one thing and they shoot it and they light it a certain kind of way, or you know what I mean, and it feels cinematic. You're getting a lot of like mileage out of that little bit that you're paying, that peanut butter.
Yeah, look at some of the stuff they're doing on Buffy. I know that's a bit of a forbidden fruit. Are you shutting me down, Jared?
All right, I gotta play the clip now. I gotta play the clip because you mentioned so Sam, I'm sure you probably picked up on this. We're not big Joss Whedon fans, so there you go.
Why did you say that name?
Correction, I like some of Joss Whedon shows, but I'm not a fan of Joss Whedon. So
yeah, I was never a fan of like the way Joss Whedon shot things, so
became Jared's best friend.
It's like I don't know, like Firefly. I love the way it was written.
Firefly was good. Serenity was good. Justice League was utter crap.
Wait, there's another cut of Justice League?
I know, right? For some reason, I keep forgetting there's only one cut of Justice League.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like it was supposed to come out in like 2017 or something, but they waited until 2020 to release it. I'm sorry, Nick. Sam, we have a
2021, Nick. Get your dates right. I know someone as ancient as you are, Nick, has trouble aligning dates.
I'm censoring this, but Jared knows what I'm doing.
I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing. But before I let you go, so this is just something I kind of want to touch. It's not related to like Batman, but screw it. I see you worked on the Green Lantern animated show, so I gotta pick your brain.
We have to.
I'm a huge like Green Lantern fan, so I gotta ask you about that. So, what was that like?
That was a lot of fun, actually. I mean, there's an editor, right, that was for it, right? Because it was a Bruce Timm Umbrella show, right? He designed it and all that stuff, right? And so I remember being in edit with like Bruce and like I think 3 other people, Andrea Romano being one of them, right? I think they all started at Warner Brothers around the same time, right? And so one of the people of the 4, right, was an editor named Joe Ball, right? He was with him basically during Batman animated series, blah, 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 all that stuff, right? So he was one of the editors on Green Lantern. And I remember we were sitting in the room, we're just like, and Joe was just like, these shows are really good. He's like, I would hold these up against Batman the animated series, Justice League. He's just like, I don't understand why this isn't doing as well as those shows, because these are really good shows, right? Yeah. And so I don't know. I kind of felt the same way in a way, right? I thought like these stories, even though some were silly, some were whatever like that, but they were good, sort of isolated single stories. You know what I mean? It's a little bit more kidified in a way, but I kind of felt like it still had the gravity and the drama and the consequences. You know what I mean? The stakes. And so it was. I kind of feel like because normally I'm not a comedy guy. I'm like an action adventure guy, right? And most of my career, I've been lucky enough to sort of steer my way away from just doing like comedy things, right? So I'm not very good at it. And but I felt like Green Lantern, the animated series, was kind of like I felt like I could do that because there's things about comedy that I don't really get, like slapstick. I just don't get it. Do you know what I mean? And so the type of humor, I kind of felt like it still was epic. I felt like it was large, in scale and
concept, it is.
The depth of drama, and characters in it. So I don't know. I had a really good time because it satisfied a lot of things that I'm interested in, even though I was worried about it going on, right? Because again, like I was working on the direct-to-video stuff. Warner Brothers at the time was sort of okay. There was a period, like where Warner Brothers, had a building in Sherman Oaks, right, which is a city right in Los Angeles, right, and they had multiple floors. And then when Saturday morning cartoons died, right, Kids WB, which was a local sort of like conglomerate, I don't know. But
I remember Kids WB.
Okay,
same.
That shut down, right? Because again, the whole Saturday morning cartoon thing sort of shut down, and Warner Brothers Animation felt like it was shrinking, right? They used to own 3 floors, and they were pretty much all full, right? It became a thing where basically the second floor was totally, there was nobody on the second floor. Third floor, so I did a little bit of development for a little while. We were just in one corner. We were the only people on the floor. And then the last couple shows was on the first floor in a corner, and the rest of it was just vacant, right? And so they closed that building down. They moved back onto the Warner Brothers lot into a bungalow, basically, right? And so I moved to Marvel because I thought Warner Brothers was dead, right? And so I forgot my point now of what it was.
It's a good story. Keep going, please.
It's a really good story. We're talking about Green Lantern.
Oh, Green Lantern, right? And so, you know, I went to Marvel and I worked on some of the, you know, the direct-to-video stuff there. So I really wanted the long form, right? And then I was able to come back at Warner Brothers because they were starting to do the long form as well, right? Like, you know, again, starting sort of with Doom, you know, oh my God, the Darwin Cook one.
New Frontier.
New Frontier, you know what I mean? And then kind of
so good.
Yeah, I remember that time because like Marvel kind of like the whole direct to DVD thing. Marvel kind of started it with like Ultimate Avengers 1 and 2, and then DC kind of started it, and they just kind of picked up and ran with it. Like Marvel still did a few things. Like I think they did the Iron Man, a Doctor Strange, but eventually they kind of figured it out for some reason. But you guys, you did like a lot of origin stories, like Gotham Knights, the Superior Wonder Woman animated version. I'm just ruffling here, so this. But it's really astounding the stuff that you guys did, and then you guys did the Camu, which I think like took you guys to a whole other level. Like the Camu was like very high quality stuff. Like I said, the animation was like really great. The continuity stuff, I wasn't really a fan of it at first, but as I kind of like watched more movies, I really did got into it. Sam, you did some really great stuff, and I just want to say thank you for keeping me company on some loving. Oh God.
Well,
I was trying to be nice.
Here come the man tears. Here come the man tears.
There's a whole sort of business stuff that kind of with it too. Like the Marvel thing again is they partnered because they were trying to develop their movies, right? They were trying to pitch their movies, like that, right? So that's partially why they sort of did their 8 because they had partnered up with Lionsgate, right, to make 8 of them, right? That was the deal. 8 and that was done, right? Warner Brothers again was kind of just making things because they're trying to figure out things to make, right? And they were waiting to see how Marvel was going to sell before they really committed to it, right? Because if you think about it before, right, Sub-Zero came out, you know, obviously the Batman Beyond one, you know, and
Mystery of the Batwoman.
Yeah, and Batman Mask of the Phantasm, right?
Yeah.
So they were doing it, but not at the rate that they committed to, right? And
it was like a regular thing, in other words.
I mean, depending on who you ask, some people say that Batman Mask of the Phantasm is literally the greatest Batman movie ever made.
Yeah.
Batman movie, not just Batman animated movie.
Right. Yeah. But again, it's at the time, again, not, you know what I mean? Like, I think the animation houses, you know what I mean? The American cartoons was pretty much comedy, right? With some action adventure like G.I. Joe, He-Man, that type of stuff, right?
Yeah,
but
the 80s was kind of a weird time because it's like they're all like obsessed with like selling you toys and whatnot, and then they reined it back in the 90s, and you had like that educational kind of like quote kind of come in. So
well, again, like X-Men and Batman the animated series came out in '92, right? And so in the 90s, again, like there was that whole shift because of Batman the animated series, which, you know, and I guess X-Men as well, right? But that was different for me because again, I watched cartoons when I was a kid, but I never really wanted to work in cartoons, right? Until Batman the animated series came out, because again, it was like cinema to me.
Yeah, it was an actual story and not like kid stuff. In other words, at that
not
point,
just like one-off kind of, you know, trying to sell toys kind of thing, a toy commercial basically. Like
and I would argue a lot of the things that kind of spurred along was the fact that you had a genuine Saturday morning rivalry between Kids WB and Fox Kids. And, you know, Fox Kids had Batman, obviously Power Rangers, and whatnot. But then Kids WB had like the Superman. Eventually, they had Pokemon. It was a real back and forth.
Yeah, and so there was a big evolution that kind of happened during that time, right? And again, like that's the only reason I got into animation. Because again, if it was just kid stuff, whatever, I don't think I ever would have gotten into animation. It was pretty much Batman the Animated Series. You know what I mean?
Would you? Is there like any anime that you say is?
Oh yeah, anime was the only other thing too. Like that was the stuff that I remember as a kid, like the Macrosses. Do you know what I mean? Like the Starblade series and things like that, right? Because those people died in those movies.
Yeah.
And those are the things that sort of resonated with me as a kid. Even though, again, if you ask any sort of like a corporate exec or whatever at the time, kids don't like that stuff, right? But for me, that was the stuff that made me remember Macross.
Yeah, it's like I ran into this and I first got back into comic books because I inevitably had the conversation with my parents where they were like, "Oh, Jared, comic books are for kids," and I'm like, "Have you read Blackest Night where people's hearts are getting torn out of their chests?"
Okay, I got this is a bit of a silly question for Sam. All right. And JJheat, this is for you. So, Sam, in your professional opinion, as a fan of both comic books and anime, how do you think an encounter between Superman and Goku would go down?
Oh, no.
I'm saying encounter.
Superman wins. The answer.
No,
is
I'm saying encounter. Like they might fight, they might not. That's why I'm phrasing it that way.
We're
Sam,
literally trolling Death Battle fans right now.
This is the
like
part
I said,
that I don't contribute to. So
I respect that. I
respect
that.
Superman,
There you go.
Is there any characters you wish you could have worked on? And by the way, this is like for the Marvel or DC side.
Yeah, it's either side.
It's funny because I remember talking to Bruce Timm about this a little bit, right? Because when we were collecting comics, I think we were both Marvel fans, right? But DC, as far as animation is concerned, DC is doing but that's largely because of Bruce, right?
Bruce, Paul Dini, Alan Burnett,
Yeah, but even just Bruce selling Batman the Animated Series, right?
Yeah,
it was one of those moments, you know what I mean, that sort of changed, I think, everything, and it was very subversive, right?
What they were able to get away with that series still astounds me.
Yeah, if you ask any sort of like, I don't know what you would call it, like development person or like that, I don't think they would ever greenlit something like that. Even the whole Batman Beyond thing, whatever, they wanted a kid Batman, and Bruce Timm and Alan Burnett, they basically pitched, something
Spider-Man
that got them through it, which was Batman Beyond, which was still a very sort of, it's a younger version of a Batman, but it wasn't done in a cheesy way where I think if they wanted, it would just be like young Bruce Wayne or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Basically the Gotham show, but animated.
If you watch some of the special features for Batman Beyond, Bruce Timm himself explains he was basically just doing Spider-Man. He was kind of just doing the Spider-Man thing of Batman Beyond. Like he says that straight out.
Is.
He openly admitted it too. So
yeah.
But I will say, as far as the Batman the Animated Series, it was really made kind of like they're like, correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, you might know more about than I do, but like Batman the Animated Series was kind of rushed out, kind of meet with Batman Returns, and so like they gave him like, hey, we don't care what you make, we just want animation out of the certain days. Is that kind of like how it went down, or am I wrong?
I think again, I think a lot of it is kind of like you have to sell them on it, and then you just sort of go away and make it. Do you know what I mean? And so
yeah.
Well, the other thing is that you also kind of have to look at what was coming out at the time, because first you had The Dark Knight Returns, which did very well. Then you had the Batman, the movie with Michael Keaton, which did enormously well. So when you think about it from a business perspective, they're like, okay, you want to do a dark Batman, and that is doing us a lot of cash in the movie theaters. Go ahead, do it. Do whatever you need to do at this point.
Death of the Nightfall trilogy was also in response to the Batman films.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a weird thing to navigate. A lot of it is, subversive. A lot of it's left,
But getting back to the kind of like my original question, these are all really good stuff. But
this is another Goku question because I'm not going to answer it.
No. My question was, is there any character, Marvel or DC, that you haven't had the chance to work on that you would like to do an animated project for? And if you want to say how you would do it, feel free to add that as well.
Oh, again, it's just I'm really into like the psychological, elements of it and stuff like that. Like, again, even back in the '90s when I first got into animation, you know what I mean? I didn't think I was going to stay in animation. I thought I was going to go back into comics, after I hopefully learn to get faster. But I, whenever I would get that question, my answer was always Sandman, right? It's like I wanted.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that. Yeah.
Yeah, like back in the '90s, right? And just being able to work on Death again was literally like.
I love that short. If we're talking about like
really
the one
good.
shot. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very nerve-wracking. It's a thing of like you get what you want, and now you got to like do something. You know what I mean? So
I just want to say it's a very beautiful short. Like I love that.
It's
story.
awesome.
Well,
Like it's very touching, heartfelt. There's a lot of emotion to it, and bravo, sir.
It's one of those things where I'm like, are you sure animation's for kids?
Because that was a difficult one too, because again, the brand, right, is like that's another long sort of story within itself, right? But I remember, when I was at the whatever the meeting, right, and I was just because I'm not going to get into the specifics of the stories, right? But the basic gist of the story, right, was that I remember seeing like, hey, can we get Neil Gaiman to like, what does he want to do with it, right? And they're like, okay, he's not responding. So now, okay, now Sam, what do you want to do, right? And so I was like, well, who can we get on it, right? And James Tucker was just like, J.M. DeMatteis, you should use him. I was like, oh, I didn't know that, he was writing for us. I was just like, hell yeah, I'll do it if J.M. DeMatteis is aboard, right? So I was just like, it takes a certain kind of writer to write that, right?
Yeah.
And so of course I was just like, if it's Neil Gaiman, then perfect, right? But if it's not, I need somebody that understands this pseudo spiritual, classical kind of story, kind of, right? And then JM was available, and I was just like, thank God, right? But there was the story is basically a story that I remember when I was trying to get into comics. I had a writer friend, and we had to do samples, and so we would just come up with these small things, right? And I wanted to just do, because I was a huge Sandman fan when I was in college, right? And and so this is based off of a story of my writer friend who committed suicide when he was 30. But this was kind of like a part of an homage to him, like the name of the character, whose name is Garrett, right? Is the first name of my friend who's the writer, right? And so, it was a very, very sort of like personal story. Obviously, it's like I only had a concept in basic sort of premise of it, but JM basically fleshed the heck out of it and made it sort of like make sense and sort of, really come together. So
did Neil Gaiman ever like comment on it, like say what he thought about it?
No. So, I have a feeling he probably didn't. It's funny because I remember like when we were, when I was making it, right? And again, like I remember just being really, really sort of self-conscious and just being like, it's naive, is it, this and that. And so I remember like going to James, and going like, and showing him the animatic. And so like, what do you think about this? What should I be doing? And he's like, I love it, right? And he's just like, he was almost like, I don't even think we need the demons. Like the story is just so strong, right? And I was just like, yeah, I think that, again, the fans are going to need something. If they just don't want to, see the two people talking the whole time.
I think the demons add a bit of attention.
Yeah, it adds.
I think without them, it would be lesser. I think the demons certainly the demons help keep you interested.
Right.
The thing without it, the story is a bit, can be a bit,
Yeah. But the thing that he said was like, the only thing is it doesn't feel like British. And so I was just like, oh, that's really interesting.
That's a good note. That's good feedback.
Because I mean, I remember just like looking at like Good Omens and stuff like that. And I was like, there's a way that sort of banter kind of happens and information is sort of relayed, right? And this thing's a little bit more direct and on the nose. But again, it's like we had to tell the story in like such a short amount of time. Like this was supposed to be 13 minutes, right? This ended up being 19 minutes, And so
that's a lot more animation.
You know, so.
Yeah, as far as the British thing, I do agree with you. Like, there is kind of a certain way that a lot of like British writers write, even when they're writing Americans. There's like you said, certain like cadence, like the back and forth, that can be difficult for Americans to emulate, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I mean, I enjoyed that one, and I've never really gotten that much exposure to the character. It's just that you did it in a way where I didn't really have to like know a lot about like the lore of like Sandman in order to like, okay, I get who this is, I get what the overall gist of it.
Yeah. Good, cool.
Speaking of the shorts, did you work on the Sergeant Raw Creature Commandos short?
No. We all kind of worked on our own shorts, right? So Bruce had 2, and then Butch had 1, and then I had 1. So it didn't cross over because again, our budgets are so small, right? And again, it's like, and we had to work with an overseas studio, blah, blah, blah. But just really quick, like, so and just about the business end of it too, right? Is like the Wonder Woman movie, right? Which again, the reason I kind of bring it up is like, I was confused by the script. Is James had a plan of like he wanted to do like at least I think 2 more Wonder Woman stories, right? Teen Titans he wanted to do at least 1 more story, right? Suicide Squad he wanted to at least do another one, and Dark was another one, right? That he's like we wanted to do at least 3 stories for each one of them, right? And we were trying to set up Wonder Woman so we could. This first one was just to sort of set up her Rose Gallery, right? Or her, the people that are around her, right? But again, the business side of it is like they decided like, okay, you guys are done. We need a new voice. So Butch, you're in, you know? So the Apocalypse War was supposed to be the second Dark movie. But once like we got the word.
That makes so much sense.
Once we got word that basically we're wrapping up, we're done. We got to finish. We're finishing. James was just like, this has to be a totally different story then. You know, because we got to wrap up the universe. So that became that was supposed to be that was an entirely different story. You know what I mean?
Quick, have Barry go back in time and reset the timeline again.
Like I will say,
it was a badass movie. Don't get me wrong. I'm like, yeah, okay. You did it in a way that I'm like, okay, it makes sense. That's how the universe would be reset. He goes back in time. He starts another flashpoint.
I will say. You telling me it's supposed to be a Justice League Dark movie, it's like looking at that movie, I could totally see that. I could totally see it originally being that because like you have a lot of the same characters there too.
Yeah. So now it became Dark Apocalypse War, which is it's a dark sort of a dark movie, but now it's about the end of the world versus whatever.
I mean,
it was.
Technically, it is still a Justice League Dark movie because the main protagonist is Constantine. So
I mean, how much darker can you get? To literally summoning Trigon to fight Darkseid and still failing.
Superman gouges Darkseid's eyes out. Awesome, by the way. So he's whipping Darkseid around. Cyborg is stuck in a tree. Mira is turned into some snake creature, which those were like awesome. And I remember watching these, and I'm like, McFarlane, can I get an action figure of any of these, please?
Well, you see, Jared, Superman just wanted to cut loose for once.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. I mean, he was in a world of cardboard. Is that what you're telling me?
Not anymore.
But so yes, Sam, it was a pleasure having you on, man. You're always welcome. You have a very extensive catalog of stuff that we're definitely going to have you on for that. But before we wrap up, there's one thing I want to treat my audience with, and so as people know, I'm also in the process of creating a comic book. So I have some art that I'm going to show off briefly for the people. So here you go. This is my my little project.
Sam, what do you think? This is Jared, this is your stuff. You go.
Yeah. So essentially, this is kind of my like tribute to like a lot of what DC, a lot of like classic DC stuff. So I have my artist Dawson, and I basically do a lot of like scripting it out, and I tell him, okay, so do this. But I give him the thing about Dawson that I like is that he gets what I'm going for. So like this head on a pike, he didn't. That actually was not in the original script. He just went with it, and I'm like, that is so much better than I had.
The chat liked what they're seeing, Jared. The chat liked what they're seeing.
Yeah, so essentially it's her. She's like this uber powerful character, and she's sent to Earth to hide from my villain named Xerxes. I named everyone after a character from like Greek myth and ancient history and all that.
Yeah.
So
Sam, what do you think?
That's currently what I'm working on.
That's nice.
Thank you. So Sam, yeah, and obviously we would love to have you on again for any of these, because there's like so much stuff that we cover on here. And I'm like, oh, Sam worked on that. Wow.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, it's always fun, like, you know, kind of going back. So yeah, if there's anything that, you know, I can sort of, I don't know, add a little bit of insight on or whatever, or entertainment value.
It's always great to have an industry professional in the stream.
Heck yeah, dude. But anyway, everyone stay heroic. And I have a new outro, Sam. So Lois Lane is Lois Lame. She belongs with General Zod, Zois, and Maximus for life. See you later.